Well,
Hi, I'm at Starbucks.
hi, how are you?
I'm fine. Yeah, I hope the background noise not too much.
Oh no, I mean, yeah, just
Yeah.
just mute when you're not talking. I don't know who else is showing up today, so we'll see. Jesse's in Oxford, or he went to Oxford. He's doing a conference there. So.
But anyways, like I mentioned to you, this career path of a research software engineer, RSE, like
Yeah.
it's really interesting because Ben Dick and I were talking about it. It's like I told you, it's a mix between being a data scientist, and a software engineer.
Yeah.
Which is kind of up the field of a lot of computational scientists, anyways. But it's nice that this new career path, like there's new title for that. Because a lot of us, we end up being like jacks of all trades and not like masters of none sort of thing. Like my undergrad research was in bioinformatics.
Yeah.
And my professor, Matthew Hahn, down at IU Bloomington, he not the best biologist and not the best computer scientist, but he was really good in bioinformatics, like bringing things together. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always hard to kind of find the combination of skills that.
Yeah. Especially because like if you tell someone you're a software engineer, but you're actually like doing science and scientific research, that is pretty different. It's pretty different. Like most people assume, oh, software engineer, you're interested in working at places like Google and Microsoft, and it's like that's pretty different from what the Allen Institute and the Simons Foundation are doing in terms of software. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about the research software engineer position like last summer during the open source meetings, and but yeah, we should revisit that a little bit because it's and I've had other people interested in that as well because it's a nice kind of combination of skills, like especially with what your people learn here in this group. You're doing, say, you do Google Summer of Code, you learn some research, and a lot of people would be more interested in research coming through this group, and then putting that together. And it's definitely a needed skill because there's a lot of software that, I mean, aside from all the academic software that needs like people to have like a a way to make it like not die every 2 years. Having this sort of research approach to building software, which is I think good if you have really complex systems like we do now.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like I teach project management, and there's go through all the stuff like agile and some of the other things, and kind of get into some of these issues of like building software and how to do that, the process behind like managing a project, and we talk a little bit about research, but it's always been disconnected. It's like here's doing basic research or some sort of applied research, and then here's project management, and then they don't meet necessarily. So I think people are using like something like agile, and although that's good for like rapid prototyping and stuff, it's not good for like maintenance necessarily. It's not as good for maintenance. So there's probably a place for that to learn, like people to learn that as a skill and apply it. It's definitely different.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of organizations like say they're going to do agile.
Yeah.
But like not like really implements it. So and it's like I feel like we get together for like agile meetings, scrub meetings, and we get together, we sprint. We have to like nose on the concrete, like really grinding ourselves. But then we kind of just stop that. It's just like, what was the point of that? If you wanted us to be in grind time, we could have done that anyways. So yeah.
Yeah. I'll have to think about that.
I really want to move away from Slack in general.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that it is still relatively like professional and formal, it really does not have great functionality.
Yeah.
Discord is just so much better, but Discord is not the most formal. It's Discord. Why can't there be something like a balance, really efficient, effective communication? It's still relatively formal and professional. Like Slack is cumbersome. It's like people, the chat style in Slack is just not ideal for like keeping up with things. You have to be like paying attention to the present, to the recent messages. If you miss stuff, it's really hard to go back in Slack. So yeah.
Well, yeah, the whole reasoning of Slack is that it's searchable. Like it's supposed to, like email, you would go into an email thread and never find what you're looking for because everything's kind of in there. And
yeah, I think Slack was supposed to be like, spend less time in email for quick communication and more time in Slack.
Yeah.
But now we're just moving over to Slack as our, hours and hours in Slack every day thing too. So yeah.
Yeah, it gets like this. It's an overwhelming thing. Yeah, we talked about that like in project management, and it's an interesting conversation because it's like we use these tools to sort of make our work better, easier, and then you get to the point where it doesn't, and you have to invent something else, and you keep doing that because email was supposed to make like correspondence like better. I mean, it was like electronic, but the way the email was designed, the clients, they were to make it, things better, make things like take paper and not use paper, make everything digital. But then people were like, well, this isn't really usable. So let's create Slack. Then they created like Slack, and then it became unusable. And now if we invent something else, it'll become unusable, and so on and so forth. So maybe we'll hit upon the solution, but I don't know if it's because new problems get introduced with new systems or whether people just kind of change their preferences.
Well, I feel like psychologically, no matter what new platform or new media or communication thing you'll introduce, whether it's even we text message, we want to make a group message and just text to SMS text messages. Like people's personal habits and their preferences for how they communicate, their styles and tendencies will carry over from one place to another. Like if I have difficulty prioritizing tasks, it's not going to really matter if I'm using email or Slack. I'm still going to struggle with that on some way. So, like at the very least, like this idea of reducing that like communication platform to as minimal as possible, I completely appreciate that and respect that. But at the same time, approaching that like as a problem in and of itself just doesn't feel so ideal. It seems like it's in human nature. So it's more like a psychological thing. You need to train yourself. Like, all right, Hussein, you've spent 20 minutes checking emails. It seems like that's enough for today. If you didn't get to something, then see if you can reprioritize it. Respectfully, sort of things. Yeah.
I'm loving this conversation, and even though I do find it somewhat triggering, as my experience in software engineering was doing medical device development, right? So it's under ISO 9000 process, and is a lot of paperwork, but interesting. Who's the YouTuber? Yannick
Culture. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so his topic of one of his topics today was is it Devlin, the software, the AI software developer?
Yeah. Devin.
Yeah.
There's one made by Americans called Devin, and there's one.
Devin.
There's one made in India.
Okay.
Called
he was talking about Devin and some videos of Devin and so one I think it was put out by the company, but anyway, it was like Devin doing tasks. Sorry, I'm in a cafeteria here. Devin doing tasks, and then there was questions about the edits. Like one, like Devin did some software engineering tasks from Upwork. But like two criticisms. One, that like they've edited out that the person had, Devin had actually worked on this for days. And two, that Devin actually introduced a whole bunch of bugs in the software development and then immediately recognized that and then was just like, oh, I see your project has some software bugs. Let me work on this. Anyway, it was an interesting problem of like the agent not behaving as intended. All right, I'll try and mute though here. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, no, that's funny because I mean maybe that's what ChatGPT is doing, except it doesn't tell you. It introduces a bunch of errors, and well, you have to correct it. That's maybe a job for another query or something. Yeah, that's an interesting conversation. Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, we've Starbucks and a cafeteria. Yeah, represented today, so that's good. So yeah, welcome to the meeting. Yeah, that's good. That's there you go. So yeah, I think Jesse is in Oxford. You mentioned, I think you mentioned maybe last week that the Plot Twisters people have their conference. It's a game developers conference or something where they're presenting. So good luck to them.
Okay, I'm jealous.
Yeah, I know.
It's a great time of year to be there.
Yeah. So they're doing some things there. And Google Summer of Code, the selections are this week. So I don't know how many slots we'll get, who's going to be the people who we get, but that'll be coming up this week. So if you're looking forward to that, news will be coming soon. And then, once we get those selections made, you'll get, if you're selected, you'll get an invite email. And we'll start off with the community period. So next week at this time, we'll be in the Google Summer of Code community period. So that means that we'll be doing more tailored activities relative to that sort of thing. So, probably talking about open source, talking a little bit about the lab education, those sorts of things. So I want to spend some time on that. But we'll also try to start up our Friday meetings. I don't know about next week, but maybe the week after, where we do. We usually get all the people involved in Google Summer of Code. Jesse and myself and Morgan often attends. We'll do like a weekly check-in, and then we'll do special topics. So that's where we're talking about research software engineering originally last year, and we just talked about it once. We didn't do much more than that, so we might actually do a little bit more discussion on it this year. So people are welcome to attend that meeting. It's really updates for people actively doing projects. If people are doing open source, interested in doing open source stuff, aside from that, they're welcome to attend. And then for people who applied to Google Summer of Code, if you didn't get selected, if I don't know how many, like I said, I don't know how many slots we're going to get, but if you didn't get selected, you might still want to pursue your project over the summer. And we often do this, make this possible for people, where you can work on a project over the summer with our group, and maybe you use that for some other purpose. You might use it for next year's Google Summer of Code, or you might use it for, people usually do a bit of legwork on the projects, setting them up and getting some results. So I don't, I like to try to make sure that people don't waste their time on that, and they can actually do something productive. So those are all things that we can do this summer. So we're starting to ramp up on that schedule. Okay, yeah. Good luck at the hospital. Yeah, Roanoke, Virginia. Okay. So, all right. So we had kind of an informal discussion here about project management and research software engineering and agile. Always a good conversation. But yeah, I don't know if we had any updates. Like, I don't think anyone has, I don't know, does anyone have any updates they'd like to share?
So it's a big week in neurotech, or at least kind of EEG, electrophys, and with the GTech BCI Spring School. Everybody should check that out. It's free to register. The talks are Vienna time. GTEC's based in Austria. So they start at 1 in the morning. But they're all on YouTube as well. And I'm hoping Christoph will break the. Christoph Guger is the CEO and is the host. And their company, I think I've talked about them before. Their company does not only EEG devices, but makes the electrophyz for ECOG and surgical planning, and animal work, stroke rehabilitation. They really do kind of face all aspects of electrophyz work, and the talks really reflect that full spectrum of kind of interests and research that is really interesting. And the highlight for me was, and again, I've been doing this 30 years. I've never seen a horse go through an ERP study.
A horse? Yeah.
So, yes, you did hear that correctly. And I think I said something like, I was talking to a particular group of designers, and I was talking about one of the speakers, and I was just like, yes, he just spoke after, he just spoke after the horse, and I was like, I never thought I would write that. But there we go. Yeah. So, and it's interesting because it's similar. They have similar issues that you have with non-human primates, where sometimes the skull is such that the skull actually keeps you, or the head to where you're going to place the electrodes, actually keeps you a very large distance from the brain itself. So anyway, there were issues.
Yeah.
Came up. But they ran him. They ran the horse. It was an equine auditory ERP study.
Okay.
And I can say that is a first. But lots of great talks, and but anyway, let me also check some notes, because I think there were some other conferences and talks this week that would be of interest to them.
All right.
I need to be reminded here.
Yeah. That's great. And I think now we don't have to search an image generator for a picture of a horse with a cap on. We have a picture of it, maybe. So so that's great. Thanks for the update. Well, we'll talk about some events in a little bit here. And so we had a couple meetings this week. We had DevoWorm, of course, and then we had Cognition Futures. We brought that back. I think Jesse took some time off from that for a couple weeks, but we're back in the swing of things. We sort of got introduced to a new paper. We were talking about eruption theory. And then Thursday we did the cybernetics meeting, where we talked about another paper. And so trying to remember what it was now. But we did another paper.
Anticipatory systems?
Yes. We did an overview of anticipatory systems, where we kind of walked through what they are, and so that's interesting. It's always it's kind of a, well, I don't want to say cottage industry, but it's an area where people talk about it a lot, but there are only a handful of references that really get into it. So people are working out examples. So that's I think useful, especially in light of we've been talking about the averted regulator theorem in cybernetics, and there are a lot of parallels or contrasts to that. So that's what we went over. So that's great. Okay, did we have any other updates?
So I just wanted to mention yeah, I appreciate all this. It's been some great discussion. I think one thing I've noticed, and one thing I've been talking about people here in Indiana, like for me here in the Midwest, is that there's been talk about a lot of tech companies and businesses investing a lot and creating like a technological innovation hub here in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are now referring to this area as the Silicon Heartland. And people have been like writing and publishing books about this. Like kind of, when people talk about technology in America, no one really thinks about Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan. Or if they do, they think about like really decentralized like data centers, like maybe like the Amazon centers here in some parts of the Midwest or some parts of Ohio or Illinois. They don't think so much of like say, obviously this isn't Silicon Valley, this is just Indiana, okay? But in recent years, there have been a lot of efforts put forward by companies and businesses, including really big ones like Amazon and like this South Korean chip maker PsyArXiv, to invest here in the Midwest, turning the Rust Belt into the Tech Belt and calling it the Silicon Heartland. So I just wanted to share that in some ways. And whatever happens, happens. To be truthful, like as much as people want to invest here, like the land here is cheap. The tax rates are much lower, so you might think it's really ideal for a business. None of it is really going to amount to anything unless things really changing the culture, like changing the culture of people and what's going on here in Indiana and the Midwest, especially. Okay,
Yeah.
like legitimately, like this place, I can share with you a few articles that are describing what I was talking about. Okay, excuse me. I just wanted to share because it might be relevant to all,
Yeah.
based
Yeah.
on based in Illinois. Like, here's this idea of the Silicon Heartland. Yeah. Amazon units investing here in Indiana, creating 1,000 jobs.
Yeah.
South Korean chip maker, PsyArXiv in Indiana. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. Like, ideally, we've seen this happen before. I'm not trying to be like a naysayer, like to be pessimistic or cynical, but generally, no matter like who comes here to Indiana, in the Midwest, especially in Indiana, like Samsung starting businesses and tech centers here. I think like Honda have tried to do things too. No matter what, they always relocate, and people here in Indiana do not change and adapt as quickly as they need to. They just really don't. Okay, like a lot of the social policy and like the approaches towards money and economic spending here in Indiana are just not ideal for the type of growth that these innovative hubs and centers are looking for. People here are still pretty risk averse to change. We want to reinforce the status quo, especially here in the Midwest. And I just wanted to share this because it is interesting, and whatever happens, happens. So I'm still here in Indiana, but my company I work for, they're based over in California. So none of this actually applies to me.
Yeah.
None of it applies to me, but I am looking for jobs, and I'm including applying here in Indiana and the Midwest. So that would definitely include, like, say, because the job I work for in California, my ideal position is to go for them part time and work full time somewhere else. So that's my gist right now. I just wanted to share this because this probably does affect like what Oral is doing based here in Illinois. You might think if you're thinking about virtual reality, augmented reality research on cognition, on the mind, on the brain, like aren't the top universities based in like California, like Berkeley, or even East Coast, like Washington D.C., MIT, like, but no, we have these innovative, the idea of Indiana or the Midwest in particular, going from the Rust Belt to the Tech Belts, whatever happens, happens. So yeah.
So I mean, that's a direct sort of example from Champaign-Urbana, which is where I'm located. So that the university here is well known for like creating a lot of technology and having a very strong technology presence. And in fact, there have been a number of companies that have gone very, become very big things based on the technology from the university. So like Netscape and that whole thing that was sort of based in Champaign-Urbana. There were all sorts of technologies and some patents going on at the university that ended up becoming big concerns. And there is like a lot of tech around Chicago, like with Motorola and other companies that where they have investments, and there's this kind of interchange. A lot of people come from suburban Chicago and they go to school here, and then they become pretty big deals in tech. And so it's interesting. There's a lot of stuff that started at the university and then became big, and then the big when they become big, they're usually in Silicon Valley. And so there is this aspect of like, how do you capture that and keep it in the community, or at least in the region? And so there is a research park here, and it's growing at a pretty good clip. But it's a lot of it is it's companies from the outside who want to like put an office here to get people to kind of capture that talent. So you have Yahoo and you have Rivian and some other companies that are doing things, but they're not it's not like they're not huge homegrown things. Often they're kind of like other bigger companies that want to tap into that talent stream. And then you have this issue of funding or money. So like a lot of the money is like kind of biased towards the east and west coasts. The universities in the Midwest get money from the federal government, but it's like the venture capital, the stuff that you need to have like these to scale up to the big companies. Those aren't really, that's they don't really look upon the Midwest as like a place where they can fund. Usually if you fund, you go to the.
I mean, there are many factors involved.
Yeah.
Economic, social, even culturally.
Yeah.
The Midwest, like, is historically rooted in an agrarian society where people are from, like, the Midwest is based on farming and agriculture. People don't know like communication styles, behaviors, and cultures and approaches to the workplace and their lives that were more risk averse, more about the status quo, like approach change with caution rather than like innovative, like like different ways of thinking, different ways of doing things. So like this idea of like the Silicon Heartland. This is what I was referring to. Like say, this book by Rebecca Fadden. American Midwest was a proud bastion of good paying jobs, and it's like you know like it is happening. It is happening. Like this isn't just some pipe dream going on.
Oh yeah.
Like, but it's more so like I guess it's more so like how much of I guess what I would think about too is how much of this is really going to change like the Midwestern culture as a whole, or is it more like the Midwestern culture being embraced in a very strong technologically innovative approach to science and tech and things like that? So
Yeah.
whatever happens, happens.
Well, I think
Like,
yeah. Well, I think it's going to be like, and it is that way now, where you have certain communities where it's embraced very strongly, and others where it isn't. So like you have a university or you're like a suburb where there's like a big company. You might be, and this holds true for biotech as well, where you have a large company, like a lot of pharmaceutical companies, where they have a presence, and that community has like a very strong embrace of that. And then you go down the road 20 miles, and there's this community that's not embracing it at all because they don't have the resources there in the ground. So yeah, I think it's going to be like, but that's true of Silicon Valley too. If you go there, you have different parts of Northern California that
yeah,
aren't
and
really,
it's still like like I guess I appreciate that. Like that's all like it's just a shame that like what used to differentiate the Midwest from other parts of America has really 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 been overtaken by those other parts of America. Like even here in Indiana, like thinking about the cities that have lost their manufacturing jobs in the automobile industry and similar areas,
yeah.
like they've all moved out of Indiana, over the past century. Of course, people understand historically. I guess like yeah, like whatever happens happens wherever this goes. And like this I think it's also wise to see this in light of America's like now, excuse me, like America and a lot of other countries not so much prioritizing globalization. Like we want things here. We want things at home. We want to do things within our borders, which many countries have taken since the pandemic. We can't afford to risk, you know, the lack of opportunity now that the pandemic has shaken things up. I mean, even for me to go up and do my PhD in Canada and then the pandemic happens, that was really tough for me, even just between US and Canada. But like this idea of like you know, like it does change things, at least with the way I view like where I want to work and where and who you want to network out to and reach out to. That if we can really convince the world that the Midwest can be creative, original, innovative, we can push forward new ideas the same way other states like California and Texas can. That would really put a lot of other stuff for us on the map. So, yeah. For the most part, when I tell people I'm from Indiana, they don't really see things that way. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so one, let me just say, I still think that Indiana University has some of the best talent in the United States right now. Like, you know, I mean, yeah. Anyway, and in particular, in some of the topics that we discuss regularly, certainly Diva Worm meeting this week was basically covering James Glazer's virtual tissue, or tissue forge and related tools, but great discussion because I'm here in my hometown, and as I was driving in, this is Virginia's technology corridor, but I am in the southwest part of the state, so this is Appalachia, and my hometown probably had its peak in the 1920s as a railroad town, and it's been trying to find itself ever since in terms of what industries it can characterize itself with, and but we also have Virginia Tech here, right? So sometimes they talk about the Roanoke Blacksburg region, and that's mainly, I think, just to include Virginia Tech, because again, it is a source of funds for the state, but yeah, those are very unevenly distributed. I mean, it's how much does that get outside of the university itself, and help the community. So. Like I love this topic because it's near and dear to my heart in terms of how to use what I see in San Francisco, and it's somewhat the effect it has in terms of kind of sucking all the oxygen out of a room, and or sucking all the dollars into its coffers. And how much that gets back, and I'm here at the hospital, which I would say has now become the number one industry of Roanoke. Like it is the medical hub of this region of the country, and to some degree that's great because it's a growth industry, and there's some agglomeration effects in terms of, I think it'll continue to receive more funding to become a bigger hub because, because of all the history here with the medical centers. So I'm trying to look at, what's the balance there between, the obvious talent that tech has, and the kind of the local industry, which is the hospital, in terms of what's the synergy there. So I love this topic.
Believe me, like technology, STEM, math, science, medicine, even medical technology, bringing that to the Midwest, there'll still be large draws for that, but basically still to many other things like game industry, video game development. Good luck getting that started in the Midwest. We're not going to invest in stuff like that. So it really depends on things. But
it's really hard to, I mean, I certainly understand how hard it is to keep, it's like as soon as any talent gets identified here, it's very quickly, I would say, poached to another region.
Yeah, for sure.
I get it.
Sometimes in Indiana, I totally feel like we almost just gaslight ourselves into not wanting to get better, not wanting to innovate, not wanting to grow. Because people here are afraid of us just leaving and getting away from us. It is what it is. And I posted in the chat about personality.
Yeah.
If you actually look at the big 5 personality traits, but whether or not you believe big 5 personality is scientifically valid, I'm not going to get into that right now. But at least it has some relevance, in scientifically empirical context. But that's these 5 personality traits: agreeableness, conscientiousness, openness, neuroticism, and extroversion. Midwesterners tend to, and they actually do vary from state to state, from region to region. It is shown that people across different states have different big 5 traits. So agreeableness and conscientiousness are very high in the Midwest, but they're low on openness. They're very nice, friendly, hardworking people. They'll treat you well. They'll be kind with their manners and their attitude towards life. The truth is, people here they're not open to new ideas. They're very risk averse. It's all about the status quo here. So that's what I'm thinking about when it's how much can we change in terms of calling ourselves a Silicon Heartland? Is that actually going to change the culture, that personality? That's what I'm thinking about. And you can't change a culture. You can innovate, you can invest, but you can't change a culture of a region. So
Yeah.
I know from personal experience, many people I've worked here, at IU, at Indiana University, maybe, but especially when I worked at Purdue, okay? They are so risk averse. They're hardworking, amazing university, top tier talent, Nobel Prizes, publication quality, research output at Purdue is top tier. They have great deflation. They hold themselves to really high standards, but it's more about the status quo. So that's just some stuff I wanted to share. In terms of how this relates to oral, to the Orthogonal Research and Education Lab, I do think it'd be wise to at least look at the Midwest in light of these new advancements of how we can see this area as a Silicon Heartland. Not just core, not just the Rust Belt, but legitimately these states, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, as as legitimate tech hubs, innovation centers. So where we can go with that. So
yeah, I think that's an interesting conversation. So there are a couple themes here. One is that this kind of is sort of reminiscent of the national character studies that they did in the mid 20th century, where they said certain cultures have certain personality traits, or that cultures kind of influence how people in general, their sort of traits. So you can go back in the social science literature and read about that. And some of it is, stereotypical, but other parts of it are back in the 1980s when the United States and Japan, there was a lot of the Japanese were buying a lot of real estate in the U.S. and that there was this idea that the Japanese or the Eastern mind was a certain way, and it aged the way you would expect it to age. But I mean, no, I think there's some value in thinking about how cultural, there's this connection between the influences of culture in a certain place and how people sort of approach things. Yeah.
I mean, I know, and not only that, but specific mannerisms, Midwesterners being low in openness. We're very non-confrontational people that we avoid arguments and stuff like that. So, we don't get that flourishing or flowing of new ideas, new clashes, and people that have differences. We prefer to just keep to ourselves and avoid, difficult issues and difficult conversations here in Indiana and here in the Midwest.
Yeah.
So, and once again, with respect to oral, with respect to the Orthogonal Research and Education Lab, we continue to innovate, we continue to put out papers and things, and push forward with projects like DevoWorm and OpenWorm and whatever everything else we're doing. like seeing that in light of these growing trends of the Midwest, of the Silicon Heartland, I think that'd be really cool to see how things go. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the other theme here is if you know anything about the work of Emanuel Wallerstein, and that was again back in the mid 20th century, there was this idea of world systems theory where you have different systems where you have hubs of activity. Sometimes it's like the core of economic activity and then the periphery of economic activity. So like in Wallerstein's model, you would have like a core, which in this case would relate to like something like Silicon Valley or some of the major tech hubs, and then the periphery, which are places where they were on the outlying areas. I mean, you could explain, national development that way. You could explain colonialism that way, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a passe idea. I mean, it's carried on in other theories, but it's a general kind of approach to that where you have this model of there's a place where there's a lot of attention and investment, and then there are these other things going on that maybe don't get as much attention, but they're still kind of active, just kind of at the periphery of things. And so, yeah, I mean, as I think especially you can see that when you look at like how talent gets poached. So if you become too big of a fish in that peripheral pond, you get poached to the big leagues, as it were, and that can inhibit a lot of this kind of growth of these peripheral regions. And it's the system of sort of hierarchical system of sort of attention or of funding, and it's hard to change that. I guess is the point. Is that once you have that system established, it's hard to equalize that. Although it's if there was a lot, I think if there was a lot of attention paid to it, you might be able to improve the situation. That's what federal funding is all about, or supposed to be all about, is where you kind of fund universities if they're the Midwest, of course, has a lot of good universities, attracts a lot of international talent, and so but again, that's like there's a funding disparity with respect to like MIT, and then like maybe a place like another a Midwestern university. So it's interesting how that all plays out. Now Jesse said in the chat here, he said in upstate New York, Dan Elton and I tried to get the Tech Valley, New York space going, but we both ended up leaving the area. So that's like, again, Jesse went to the core, which is Boston, or a core, instead of staying in, yeah.
There's like a lot. Like, I'm sure we want one other things, but like, now that I've kind of been in Boston and seen the transition and sort of the vacuum and the poaching and the like all these events I'm going to based are MIT associated, but like it's very clear like it's part MIT and part just like this is the subtext and the banner of like AI and tech development. Like it's like this is it's not like MIT's everywhere, even though it is, which is kind of like it makes you think a little bit about like the institution as it was portrayed in like Fallout 4. It's like, oh man, it's everywhere. But it's like it's weird. I think I haven't lived in like a center of gravity until moving to Boston. Even my first few years in Boston, I wasn't like doing a lot there. So seeing it, living in it, is different. I'm sure there's a lot of interesting stories. Like everything you've been saying, and Morgan and Bradley saying too. So yeah, I was that was a personal anecdote for the. It was really tough because upstate New York has a lot going on too, but there's also this very particular drift, and there are many opportunities. Like IBM was going to do something there. Was all these different companies going to develop something there or in Massachusetts? And New York City is not far away from Albany or upstate New York either, but it's a different kind of hub with a different. It's almost like trade winds of sorts, just pushing things in directions. And then world system stuff. So, also hi from I'm in England today. So
Yeah.
hello.
Yeah. Hello, Vrushali and Sarrah. Welcome.
Hi.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a great conversation. I'd like to move on to some other things, but if you're interested in continuing this would be a good thing to think about. I know we don't talk too much about like things like this, but I think it's important because it does explain a lot about how technology gets developed, and ultimately, like with respect to AI ethics and things like that, where you have people developing technologies that are kind of separated from the communities that are using them. So it's important to think that way, and yeah. So okay, I think I'll.
I had,
Oh, go ahead.
well, I was just going to talk about something that was also going on this week, but more in the computational systems biology, that to kind of keep a thread going on the combined harmony stuff.
Oh yeah.
So, welcome. I think it's like welcome Sanger, the Sanger. Anyway, never heard it pronounced. But in Ixton there, they're doing computational systems biology for complex human disease from static dynamic representations of disease mechanisms. Anyway, it looked great. I wish I could have been there. Trying to, I dropped links in Brain Organoids.
Okay.
And yeah, just would love to make sure we keep that theme going in terms of tissue forge, computational systems biology, and the tools and techniques.
Yeah. So like this week's DivaWorm meeting, we talked about Tissue Forge. We went over that's an open source package that where you can model cells as like sheets of cells and tissues. So it's nice because they have a lot of tools that you would otherwise have to go to many different packages and sort of integrate. So they have everything there. There's a physics to that to the models, and you can run different types of models. You can run like molecular models, cellular models, and they have like a lot of different physics that you can simulate in there. So, but we go over that in the DivaWorm meeting, and then we talked about combined harmony, which of course Paola presented her talk on cards, ML cards, and then this is Paola's update here in the chat. An update for me, Paola DiMaio. Then this is 2024. Non-invasive neuromodulation to stimulate reduced blood flow and mitigate cognitive decline in psychomotor conditions. Yeah, she's got it on Figshare.
Thank you so much, Bradley, for reading it out. I'll just say hi to everyone.
Hi.
And hello, especially to the people who I haven't met yet, like Singh for the first time, and Sarah, and Shaw, I think. And so this particular paper is just a note. It's a poster that was accepted at the Michigan, was it? Oh my God, I forgot. It was accepted as a poster at the Neuroscience conference a few weeks ago. And my God, my cognitive decline anyway, somewhere. Then I was hoping that I could find a co-presenter, and so someone who could go physically because it was accepted, but somebody had to be there. I'm so used to the virtual presentation. I assumed that I could present virtually, and they said, no, you have to be here. And then it turned out that I couldn't send anyone, so it's kind of withdrawn, but it was accepted, so it's good. And this paper, you can take a quick look. It's nothing too major, but sorry, are you asking me a question, Morgan?
Oh, sorry. Where did you say it's the conferences?
I can't remember.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Okay.
Minnesota
in the
Neuromodulation
States,
Society.
In the States?
It was my first post to the Slack. We have a Slack. It was because it's midnight here, and I was kind of half asleep when I remember. Oh, I do have a date on Saturday night with a bunch of people, so I woke up, but upstream. So, and this it's the first post that I had was exactly the same. Hey, I got accepted, and so it's somewhere in between. And Minnesota,
Yeah.
Neuromodulation was a medical devices conference.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's a great spot.
If you submit the poster, you get a free admission for the conference. So I thought I'd try, and the poster obviously was liked because it's very topical. It's something I've been working a lot on in terms of because I have realized that we all have cognition issues with parents with the decline, and there's this cognitive decline has been very much of my concern, and I have understood something which I explained in the paper, and I had this hypothesis that blood flow does trigger certain important cognitive mechanisms. And so what I did, I didn't do any primary research, but I started searching for evidence in the literature. And I said, is there evidence that blood flow in the brain, cerebral blood flow, triggers important mechanisms for cognition, but also for motor ability, so psychomotor. And then it turns out that there is quite a lot of evidence to show that that is the case. So because I'm a bit of a hybrid, interdisciplinary person and kind of a practitioner, I'm a very pragmatic person. What I do is that, especially in the case of my parents or myself or other people that I know, I start saying, okay, how can they increase blood flow to the brain non-invasively? I do non-invasive neuromodulation. And I started experimenting with devices, but with devices that you can actually, the cheap ones that you can buy on Amazon, like everyday devices. Is there anything that, and there are kind of a bunch of devices from, which I will talk to you about. I'll give another presentation about that later. It's a long story. But anyway, that is the abstract which was accepted, which I never got the chance to discuss. And what I want to say today very quickly is that I am just starting to get a hang of photo in the lab. I just figured out that Orwell is not just surname because it's just rare with his surname, and then I started realizing that we are intersecting at different levels, and it's great. And I want to make the most of this. And Morgan, I dropped out of your computational psychiatry channel because in Slack because it was too far out. I am far out, but that's too far out. But I'm still on the brain organoid channel, just see if I can work with that much. And I have actually started. I made a comment on Hussein's paper. Hussein, did you see the paper?
Yeah, I saw the comments. Yep. Yeah, I saw the comments. Thanks.
I didn't know if it's valid comment, but that's what the only thing I studied. I felt we should focus on that. But if you disagree, of course, we can talk about it in time. And what I'm thinking is because what I think I'm gonna find most value in this intersection. I realize you have other meetings going on, and is that there's a lot of important information that people are facilitating. And I wondered, Bradley, would it be useful or would it be a good idea to have a kind of a mini journal of these meetings because there is so much information and because we're struggling with information where I am. So would it be useful to have some of the useful resources that people are sharing on a journal for these meetings? And you don't have to answer now.
You mean like a customized journal for the lab or for?
For this meeting, I don't know, for this meeting or for the lab, rather than a journal in the sense of publishing original papers, just a journal of what people are saying, because there is so much information at very fast pace. And these chats, difficult to scroll. So I was wondering, could we collaboratively create a Google Doc for each of these meetings where we can even Slack is not working anymore. It's limited. So would it be worth having a Google Doc where we can paste our stuff during the meetings for future reference? And this is just an idea. And if you think it's a good idea, I wouldn't mind starting it because then at least we can always go back. And then I wanted to say a couple of other things. I've started like part conversations, and then part I forgot what I wanted to say. But so yeah, it would be great. I wanted to ask Bradly a couple of things. I don't know now or in the future. You mentioned those Google coders with Jasmine here, and I don't interface with Google Summer Code because I'm not a programmer. But of course, I do the model cards, and I heard at some point with the fraction of my brain that there is a Google Summer of Documents.
Yes, there is.
And that I can do, and that is something I would like. So just on the side, so I don't do code, although I have occasionally get to do, but it's not my focus. But documents are, so let me know if there's any intersection with that. And oh yeah, you said you were gonna use this combined input for a worm conference or something. Would you mind giving any update to that? Just a few words, if you have any. And that's it for me.
Okay. I'm not sure about that last point. I don't know what that's in reference to. You mean like the data sets?
You had your conference, worm dev worm.
Oh yeah,
In one of the
and Diva worm.
On the Slack, you said that you were going to use the input, some of the inputs that I gave, the input that I gave from this combine to discuss it into the worm dev or dev worm. I don't remember what it was. And I wonder if you have any follow-up on that.
Yeah. Oh well, what I was referring to is I discussed the Combine Harmony conference in this week's meeting. So like DevaWorm meetings are kind of like this meeting. It's a special meeting. It's shorter a little bit. And we talked about the proceedings of that meeting in DevaWorm, and we kind of went over it a little bit. So that's all I was referring to there.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's actually available on YouTube if you want to check out the overview. Of course, you were involved with it, so I don't know how useful it is. We didn't really get into that much depth, but we just kind of talked about like biological modeling very generally, and how the different kinds of things that people are interested in, especially with respect to that conference. But one of your other points here was about model cards and Google Summer of Docs. So there is a Google Summer of Docs, but we don't. It's a lot different than Summer of Code, and we don't typically participate in it. It's a little bit harder to do because the projects are. I don't know. I've done it once, and it wasn't quite the same as Summer of Code. So I don't know if I'd be interested in doing Summer of Docs, at least now. But what I think would be interesting would be, our open source meetings that we're going to have. If we could talk more about things like model cards. I don't know if you can make those meetings, but like, we could definitely have a, set of conversations about, model auditing and things like that. And so I have usually during the summer, we have our GSOC reports on projects, weekly updates, and then we have topics, and that might be one of the topics we cover for a couple weeks or something, where we get into some of the details of that, and that might be interesting to kind of further that conversation, or maybe further some work on it. So that's something, and then the Google Docs for meetings. So Jesse has been very fastidious about having a Notion for the meetings. We haven't had one in a while, but usually what we do is have like a Notion doc, which is it's not a Google Doc. It's like better, I guess, than a Google Doc. And so Jesse, you want to say something about that?
Well, yeah. It's kind of funny because I think that drifted off a little bit before.
Yeah.
Paolo kind of became more regular here, and it drifted off for a few reasons. I mean, I'm still up for doing it, but I think one, I'm noticing that a lot of people, like, it was basically only me who would be going there and doing it. And I think if I think it's a great idea to have like a running log of like just links, things that are being shared. But I think it would be better to have like a Google Doc that's a little more accessible to do so, because just lowering the barriers of friction to do it. And it could just be like weekly, or it could be sort of like, like it could just be a running agenda list too. I'm very open to doing it, and I'm happy to even maintain it again. But I think it's more like I'm not sure. I think it takes a critical mass for it to be more than just some person scribbling notes that nobody looks at, to be blunt in that sense. But if there's something there that people want to do, like there's so much content, like I totally think that there's ways to either have something or to I think that the broader question is, for people who come here, like there's a really weird learning curve, because it's like we're really doing orthogonal stuff, or at seemingly, but there's a lot of there's I feel like orthogonal labs sort of almost a name in jest at times, because we're like trying to find the connections. We're trying to really, do ridiculously interdisciplinary stuff, as it was said somewhere, I guess. So I think it's like, what do we do with that? And I think having a shared document is a place to do it, almost like you're going to a conference with a group of friends or people, and you're like, yeah, let's just take a shared notes document. Let's take all the notes together. But that's every Saturday. Because you don't really know where it's going to go.
But for me, Jazz, if I may interrupt you, it's starting to become like, oh my gosh, I can talk to people about things that I'm interested in. Simple as that. Even if it's just a few minutes, share a link. Whilst otherwise, I struggle. Even in other circumstances, if you work in a place where you can practically be made, there is always an agenda that people really have to follow strictly. There is something to be done. There is no time for conversations. And here, there is conversation for now. So for me, this is a place where, if I can, apart from the fact that it's is fine. And so let me suggest this, Jess, since you're at work. Not today, because I'm a little bit slow tonight, but maybe as of next week, I will start it, or you can start it, a Google Doc, which simply says this date, these people have been on, and if everyone at the meeting can dump whatever they think they want to share permanently with us. Some chit chat, maybe we don't need to write down. But maybe there is an important paper, an important reference, a note that mentions the conference. Because we're going to forget it tomorrow. And then we keep it simple, very simple. Today's date, this is my info on this meeting. And then let's see how it goes. And of course, if it doesn't work, we forget about it. But I think I would find it useful because there's so much going on, plus a lot of references to other things going on. And let's try if that's okay.
Yeah, I think it would be worth, I haven't done this, but I assume it would be easy to scrape all the previous YouTube videos, because Bradley puts a little blurb plus links to the papers that he covers with the YouTube. And I just wanted to add that I don't know what Jitsi does on this, but all our meetings in Google Meets are actually transcribed by an app. So it's like we have a user. We have a user on for our governance meetings, the biolab and things like that, where it's like I think it's Otter. Does that sound right?
Otter AI,
yeah. And so like Otter sits in on our meetings and then gives us a transcription. I do think YouTube produces it. I forget how it does it, but like, can't you get YouTube to generate a transcription?
Yeah,
Normally, yes, but I don't know if it's, yeah, let's look at it.
well, you can get like
Maybe
captions,
we already have, but they're not very
and you can
accurate.
get
Probably.
and you can get chapters.
Anyway, I mean,
Yeah,
just as a or my main comment was just like, I would love to scrape the YouTube videos and basically have Bradley's blurb plus the links as like a weekly blog post. You know, like that having that as RSS feeds
Yeah.
would be awesome.
Yeah, and
And again, I'm not trying to generate work for you, Bradley. Like
Yeah.
I would help.
well, this is
No,
where
it-
AI is supposed to be helpful, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that's super helpful. Yeah, and there's got to be a Jitsi version of that, right? Or like, do you pay for Otter and it just?
Yeah, you pay for
Right.
Otter, but I mean, like YouTube does a lot
okay.
of the extraction too. Like if you use YouTube, it'll make
Yeah.
chapters which you can queue up,
Yeah.
and so you can do. I
Yeah.
used to do blog posts like summarizing discussions over several weeks. You know, where okay, this discussion is this, and we have a link to it and that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you can do
Well, I
that.
mean, to Paola's point, like I think a lot more people would get something from it if we had an RSS feed that was syndicating your links and like kind of just major themes of the without even like the transcription or anything. Anyway.
No,
But
just
I love it.
the
I love
main point, because people can follow up. Because the problem is, if we generate long scripts, people are not going to be able to read them. I mean, I don't know everybody else, but I am overloaded. I'm interested in the conversations, but there's only so much. I mean, they can't go through the brain. But what I need to focus on are the resources that are being shared and the main points. Like, major discovery, major conference, or this is useful. And then people can pick on whatever is useful to them. So I would start very minimally with a minor blurb and just whatever people want to contribute to, like, for example, I'm going to this conference, just put the link there. I have this presentation, put the link to a couple of lines. And then at the end, it's going to be easy to look back and to try to remember what everybody did or said, because otherwise I don't know. How long have you been going with this meeting, by the way?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, I mean, I used to work out these strategies, and then we forget, like we kind of drop them because they're. I don't know. I mean, like we've had a number of these rounds where we say, "Oh, this would be a great idea." We start the practice, and then it kind of goes away. So I mean, it's something that we'll have to revisit probably again, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, well, we'll think about it some more, I guess. Yeah, and like Jesse says in the chat, he talked about the Notion workspace using Docs and GitHub, or a combination of tools that exist. Otter AI is a paid service, so it's kind of, you have to justify that investment. And I don't know if there's a free version. I mean, Otter AI, you can do it for free, but it's not doesn't do very much.
So the other things I'll say in my lab manager hack for this is sort of I think that, like, yeah, the outside of, I don't want to dwell on that, but like I think functionally it comes down to like a critical mass of interest that sustains it, because
Yeah.
that's what does it or not. And we have a critical mass now, so let's. I mean, I'm finally riding the wave again and trying to do that too. Also, like I do want to get some, even like general like assistant lab manager support stuff, or like interns to help with that, because it's something that is an opportunity that's come before. That said, well, one other thing too, nobody reads everything in Slack.
Yeah.
And in reality, our Slack has kind of become a link dump with a bunch of topics. And the Slack is not project based. I think another point that Paula brings up is sort of where is what's happening project wise in the lab. And I think I might just consolidate that into, I mean, I think what I've been sort of trying to do is just post the updates from from actual Clean Sheet Futures meetings, or cybernetics reading group in general. But like, I think there could just be a project development channel that's like what's happening, because the conversations are one thing, but like there's work like on the DSM project, there's stuff happening in the reading group, stuff in clinical futures, there's a cybernetics manuscript that's being made, but like they're like buried, like nobody knows that unless you go to the meetings, and that's a hard thing to do. And it's weird because this live group is extremely public, and we're kind of talking about a lot of things that we're doing here, but at the same time, like these aren't all like these, like this meeting isn't like a working meeting, so it's tough and it's confusing that way at times. And I think I've been, I'm always considering the best way to deal with that. But the Slack, yeah, like I think we should give people a disclaimer, like, hey, there's not an expectation that you read everything in the Slack channels, because it's like it's impossible to do. Like we don't even get through them on when we catch up with them most of the time, and then finally, and maybe the most like productive point I'm trying to make is I actually am prospecting a few automation services, both for like segmenting and transcripts and other things, but for myself, but also like I would easily double dip with a lab if I'm going to do it anyway. And there's a bunch of services like that do transcribe, but also like in an ideal world, I'd love to segment the videos and break them down in like useful discussions, and then have those discussions be like their own playlist. That'd be like really awesome. And then, auto generate like a blog from it or something, or like that's not quite here yet. And it's also very tough because like AI summarizers are kind of okay for like, what does this generic news article say happened about very obvious topics? And I find the quality drops off really fast when you get into technical spaces or interdisciplinary spaces, or things that are actually competing themes and narratives. Like it really just, it's not the same. And if people find things that are really good at that, like more academic summarizers, because I've seen even like Kaggle or I forget what it's called, not Kaggle, but there's a bunch of summarizers that people have been floating my way, and I'd be really curious to find things that could generate summaries at that level too. But just to mention, like it's been on my mind, and I would like to do it on different fronts.
Thank you, Jez.
Yep,
I'll just say that, by the way, if we had a Google Doc for each meeting, just to take and share quick notes, I think this could also maybe, because I see that Bradley is writing, so I presume Bradley is writing notes. Is that right, Bradley? Are you taking notes?
Yeah, I do take
Bradley,
notes. Yeah, and we have notes.
But where do you take them, on paper?
Usually, yeah, and then I transcribe it to a digital format. So I have notes.
So why not have a Google Doc where you could write them directly into the doc, unless you want to keep them to yourself. But if you want them to be useful, then we could all help.
Yeah.
So rather than you having to write everything down, I could write my links. So you wouldn't have to write them and then transcribe. And also it could help me, because during the week I see a lot of things which I thought, oh, that's a really nice thought. As you just mentioned it at the Saturday meeting, but then by the next hour I completely forgot. The tabs are crashing, I completely forgot which pages are being. Instead, what I could do is I could prepare a mini contribution for every meeting saying, oh, these are the things I'd like to share today. And it's going to be like a few bullet points with a few links. And it could be as a mnemonics for what we want to talk about on Saturday. And then if we don't have time, we still have the link there so people can go and check out in their own time if they're interested. So let's try that.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, I can. Well, the notes I take, I usually like type them up and share them. I don't share them, but I can. Like I can put them in a format and link them off of so the YouTube video usually has the stub underneath, and that's where a lot of the metadata lives. Those can also go on GitHub there's a GitHub stub for it as well. So there are a lot of ways we can do this. But yeah, I can go over that maybe next week too, how this is done. So it's been
Thank you
helpful
for
to
taking
see.
the suggestion on board.
Yeah.
And at some point, for this late night, I might drop out. But if we had a little journal, I could over. Well, we have the video, right? So thank you so much to everyone, and in particular, thank you for giving a space for people to share. Thank you.
Yeah, we're always trying to make the materials better because there's always so much in there. Okay, so we had Hussein said, "I'm just glad we don't use Zoom, and Zoom, of course, is very friction filled."
Oh yeah, it's okay. It's not. It's okay. Security and privacy reasons aside, but those are the biggest reasons. But like, it's completely outdated, cumbersome, like Zoom. But sorry, it's just my personal opinion.
I know.
I wanted to ask also, Google Meets, Jitsi, anything else, just not Zoom. Like Zoom got lucky that it happened to be the big thing during the pandemic. It was not ideal. It just caught on, so everybody used it.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. So let's talk. Can I talk about
Jitsi?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can we talk about the ethical considerations?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can share my screen. How does that sound?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I shared the documents in Slack, but I'll share the screen anyways.
Okay.
I'll share my tab. There we go. So this is an idea for a manuscript on the ethical considerations of AI-assisted closed-loop stimulation, or like neurostimulation. Essentially, as I've outlined, the general broad question we want to ask is, what are the ethical considerations related to AI-assisted closed-loop neurostimulation? So neurostimulation being the closed loop protocol between detecting, like, say, stimuli or signal from the brain, being able to visualize the EEG, MEG, ECOG, fMRI, whatever you're looking at, and command to an external device. Say like for motor control, for maybe speech, for tactile anything. And that device sends the signal back to a controller and then an encoder, which that is the AI, that is the artificial intelligence. So whatever the response is given from the brain and how it conducts or communicates with the environment and world around it, how is that sent to another device that operates using deep learning, machine learning, or AI approaches to reinforce and create a closed loop feedback with the person who is sending out the brain activity or the signals itself, okay? Essentially, this has been used already, as I've outlined in the paper, or this very, very, very rough draft of notes. If we want to get a paper or something like this together, I definitely can see us doing this by the summer, at the very least having a decently put rough draft, because we're going to have to be very, very thorough in the literature and make sure we're creating and putting something new to the table, bringing something that hasn't been written about before. There are already a lot of papers on AI-assisted approaches to healthcare, like medicine, medical technology in general, but not so much specifically on AI-assisted closed-loop stimulation or neurostimulation approaches. So, there's my spiel. Hopefully we can get on board with this pretty soon. And yeah, this is just going to be about publishing a paper. No one's getting paid. I'm not like, this isn't for like GSOC or anything, but co-author paper on a manuscript is great work anyway. So thanks, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is meant to be a review article, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, ideally a review, but we are posing our own questions too. We're giving our own opinions and our critiques and comments. Like, what are the considerations themselves with AI-assisted closed-loop neurostimulation methods? So yeah. I could see some analysis being done, like some data, some charts, plots, figures, graphs being driven on, say, certain metrics, like, say, explainability. Okay, excuse me. Like the actual impacts and effects on the health of the humans, those can be quantified. And seeing to what extent these, so what I'm saying is there can be some analysis with this. It's not just reading papers and, creating like an encyclopedia. We are going to be doing our analysis ourselves for this too, even if it is a literature review. That's not completely devoid of, like, say, graphs, figures, charts, and stuff. So yeah. Cool. So this is a great one to get on board with, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, if we want to do this, we definitely have to kind of think about the schedule for it. So, like, how long, if someone wants to take responsibility for a certain section, please do so, but you have to stay to a schedule. Say, I'm going to do this in every week. I'm going to do a little bit of review or synthesis or whatever, and then we can bring it together later. And writing papers collaboratively is one of the great challenges, I think, of because you have a number of people who want to put their stuff in, and you have to get all the stuff in a timely manner and then integrate it into the paper, and then getting everything edited so that it makes sense to the reader, because the reader is the person who really consumes it and does something with it. So you want to make it relevant to the readers wherever this is going to be published. I suggest we do this, we get this together, we kind of people make their contributions, and then do a preprint where people can comment on it, and then eventually you can get it published. But a lot of times people will preprint it and then say, solicit, like say on social media, and say, how can are we on the right track? How can this be improved? This is timely, but maybe it could be more timely. You'll get feedback like that, but also it's it's really kind of, I think a lot of the things we've been talking about in like brain organoids and in computational psychiatry could really be put into this paper. I don't know. If you go through the channel, you might see themes. You might be able to get a sense of like some of these issues. There might be some papers that kind of capture your imagination. So really, I think we should leverage that.
Yeah.
I think I didn't I pitch this idea for a paper like
a
back in
long time ago,
2022?
yeah.
Wasn't it 2022? And then
Yeah.
like I made some progress, but ultimately it was like there was no like specific purpose, like there was no upcoming conference or thing for it. But I think it's, sorry, excuse me, like I'm the type of person who like I kind of like not necessarily like need to have a purpose for what I'm doing, but it can be hard to like get together and say, let's just do a paper willy nilly. And it's like, okay, but what's the overall goal, or what's this gonna, like that can be hard to get involved. But yeah, there's always conferences and symposiums and abstract submissions opening up left and right for all these sorts of things.
Yeah.
So regardless of whether I see one right now, like like in the next few months, but we're not gonna get it. That's way too quick to get a paper together. So it's great to have this in mind right now. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Excuse me, like yeah, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that, and this kind of relates to Paola too. I put a lot more neuroethics links and meetings in NeuroTechX's Slack, and yeah, so I haven't thought about it in a while, but I've definitely been continuing to track things in NeuroTechX's on what I would call neuroethics. And there's actually been a lot of really interesting legal things happening, and both discussions, and Colorado just passed this law, and there's a discussion in a couple other states about this. Anyway, yeah, very happy to talk about it. And just related to the previous discussion as well about non-invasive brain stimulation, like also again, like the discussion's happening a bit more in NeuroTechX on that regard. Computational or psychiatry is more my interest, but I follow with a keen eye on the new developments in neurodegeneration, especially around the causes of mild cognitive impairment and further dementia, with both the glymphatic system and as well as the overall cerebral vascular issues, and the different interactions there, in terms of related to cognition. sounds like would be of interest to Paola.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, we'll see where this
Thank you.
goes.
I wanted to quickly say something
Okay.
to Hussein. Hussein, what did you see my notes about methodology? I wanted you to spend a few seconds just to say, what do you think about my input?
No, you're absolutely correct. Like, we need to identify the concerns and address them. Just some plan and stick to the topics. So, about what exactly are the ethical concerns? Like being clear about that. I think I'd outlined a few things, like the core themes of the ethical dilemmas, or I can actually put them in the chat there if you want to take a look. But it's in the documents. There's a small section that says core themes of ethical dilemmas. So starting by expanding upon those four would definitely be the best thing to do, and structuring the paper outside and around that, I could see things going forward like that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Because
Yeah.
there's so much stuff in that paper. There's a short paper with like 100 ideas. And if you want to write a paper, I'm afraid that's one thing I've learned on my skin. You need to define what you want to write the paper on, and just follow a fairly. And I am all for writing open reading, free flow is good, but we never get to the bottom of it. I can tell you now.
Yeah.
So glad that you want to take that step on board. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm definitely open to being more focused about a specific topic or specific set of topics. Because all the links that I've given here, yes, there are many links, and a lot of them are kind of like not exactly so related. Like I linked the Stanford Encyclopedia page. That's a good starting point to look for sources, but we're not writing about just philosophy and ethics in general. We are focusing on this specific topic for AI-assisted closed-loop neurostimulation. So we'll see where things go with that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I would like to at least have a bit of a data approach somewhere in here, even if it's just like a small or simple graph or visualization of some kind. It's just, a literary review of ethical issues. It's like, this is like, where would you go with that? But that's something I'd like to keep in mind. I think that would be cool to have, like more of not a high priority, but more of a cool to have sort of thing. So just gotta keep that in mind. Yeah.
Great. That sounds great. So yeah, I'm gonna move on to some things I had to, like some features, some news. So one of the things I wanted to point out was that I just got done writing a paper for the, it's actually for Beacon AI 2024, but it's not being, they're doing it in a different way this year. So the deadline was really quick. So I wrote this stuff on allostasis machines and some modeling work that I've been kind of doing in note form on continuous cognitive modeling. And so I've got this PsyArXiv preprint version of this where it kind of goes through sort of our work on allostasis machines, but kind of going through some of the mathematical modeling of it. And so this is on the PsyArXiv, kind of some ideas about how to look at different perturbations during continuous cognition, different responses and things like that. You have to read through the paper to know. We've done some work on allostasis machines, which are basically these outputs of cognition. So the idea is you have some artificial model or some brain, or some model of the brain where you have sensory information coming in and the cognitive output comes out like this, and you get these perturbations that happen independently of information processing in the internal model, which is like the nervous system or some AI model. And then the system can either recover from those perturbations or it gets driven to some unstable state or some new regulated state. So this is very much in the spirit of the allostatic stuff that we've been talking about in our cognition futures group and in our cybernetics group. And then, we did a paper on allostasis machines with, sort of more of a theoretical bent. So that paper was at SIGCHI in 2021. So this is kind of a follow-up to some of those ideas. And this is a shorter paper, so it's like just for the conference. So we'll see, how this is received. We did want to at one time write a paper on allostasis machines using reinforcement learning, which would be a natural sort of approach to this problem where, you have some, like, instead of internal model here, you would have a reinforcement learning algorithm, and then that reinforcement learning algorithm would produce outputs from the policy choice, and then those perturbations would either, you could recover from those perturbations or not, and if you can't, then you would change your policy, something like that. But that never got anywhere. So we might write another paper, some of us, on using allostasis machines, but instead of kind of a cognitive model, or kind of like a theoretical paper, we use something with like a machine learning methodology or a reinforcement learning methodology, and actually producing some results in that area. So this is an area that we've been working on kind of off and on, and I think I'm kind of hoping that we can, we have a bunch of things in this developmental AI area. We've done developmental neurosimulation, we've done this allostasis machines work, and we have some other things that we've been developing, and it's kind of an off and on affair because we get opportunities to kind of work these ideas out and present them, and that's good. But it's like with the EI workshop, they're not consistent. So if people are, and I should make more of an advertisement for some of these techniques, but we'd like to work out some of these. Someone can kind of attach themselves to one of these techniques and work out a nice paper on it. So that's new on the PsyArXiv. Another thing I'd like to talk about is this Galaxy project. This is the Galaxy 2024. I guess that's a conference on this project. So Galaxy is a pipeline for genomics, is it? Morgan?
Yeah, it's sort of think of it as like a distro slash like Globus user. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I haven't actually looked at the history, but I want to say that I saw it first at Ventnor Institute. Like and like just to remember how important Ventnor was in terms of getting sequencing, computational sequencing, going.
Yeah.
And like how much of that was, they were like great early adopters of a lot of open source tech on that, which was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is an event in the Czech Republic, and this is their flagship event. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And then the other just backstory for this is that that is where that town is where Red Hat is based.
Oh, really?
And yeah. So like it's their kind of secret. It's the unfortunate like choosing people engineering talent that they can pay less than U.S. engineers,
yeah.
right? But like Fedora, we used to always have conferences in or near there because that's where their engineering team was outside, like biggest group outside of the States.
Yeah.
And they have a great open source conference too. I think it's DevConf. Anyway, some good history there.
Yeah. So yeah, this is galaxyproject.org. So this is where they're looking for like methods, tools, pipelines, trainings or software that push the field of data science with Galaxy forward. So this is, of course, this Galaxy platform. If you go here, Galaxy project, they kind of go through, they have tutorials, videos, vetted workflows, which are just kind of like formalized workflows. So if you're doing a lot of genomics data, where you're working with biomedical sequence data, you want to have a good workflow, and people publish these so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. They have a blog so you can catch up on things. They have their community, their data sets, and then, help and support. So this is a nice set of resources. And, this is, again, the kind of model that we want to use for open source for these kind of big projects. But, for smaller projects, this works well too, this kind of structure where you have the tutorials and the workflows and the video tutorials and data sets and things like that. So this is a nice set of resources, and hopefully, I don't know, we don't really do a lot in that space, but I am slightly familiar with Galaxy. But yeah, it's a nice community there. You have anything else to say about that, Morgan?
No, I can follow up though. Yeah, I was definitely interested. I wonder if it's being used by more projects now, and like outside of bioinformatics. But I also wonder like how much what's the but like how much you see like bioconductor there, and other big bioinformatics things. Anyway, yeah, it's great, and this theme that I've also been pushing, and until recently, like with a number of projects, but now Neurodesk kind of puts it all together and is giving you kind of where it's like a multi-distro platform, because of containerization allows for so much more than how we kind of previously been trying to create a platform. And their use of these tools that are coming from CERN, that are again really interesting, learning from how CERN does massive collaboration with thousands of physicists, looking at super large data sets of a size that are that are difficult to get on your laptop. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
And this is it's certainly a big problem in neuroimaging these days, and and if we're doing things right, will be a problem in neuroscience in general. From just I mean, just thinking about like again, like original Brain Initiative goals, right? Was just like, how can we record from every neuron in the brain? Like getting all sorts of multimodal data, right? I mean, it was very blue sky, but again, that was what was so brilliant about it.
Yeah, after the recent brain cuts too, so
yeah, I know.
That's what you can do. That was really tough.
Yeah. So that's big news in the neuroscience world for sure.
Yeah.
The French have got huge problems too in terms of their funding.
Oh yeah. Okay, so then I wanted to go to this. No thanks. So I wanted to go to this. This is a roundup from NeurIPS 2023, which was a bit off in the past now, but this is an interesting set of resources on generative protein design. So, NeurIPS, of course, they're doing a lot of stuff with machine learning and other types of AI, I guess mostly machine learning and deep learning, but they're also doing things, of course, with generative protein design and some bioinformatics stuff. So this generative protein design took center stage at NeurIPS 2023. In part one of a three-part series, we highlight several papers, authors, and takeaways about the intersection of ML and proteins. This is from Dimension, which is, I think, on, I don't know where, I think maybe Substack based, but they have this, it's at dimensioncap.com. So that's where this is coming from. So this is part one, where they have this machine learning and biological research interaction. I've done my best to tag authors. So there's this generative protein design aspect. Then I think in part two, there's generative chemistry, and then drug target interaction prediction. So these are all things that people are kind of exploring with these technologies. Of course, we know about some of the stuff that's been done with respect to protein sequence prediction and that sort of thing. And then there have been a lot of advances in protein folding using biophysics models. So there's a lot of opportunity here in this space. So they have these different topics here, these kind of takeaways. Optimizing, number one is optimizing proteins in structure space is easier than in sequence space. So this is where you have these two problems. One is protein sequence prediction, which is where you have proteins as a sequence of amino acids, and you're trying to predict those sequences and come up with viable proteins. You have this other problem, which is protein structure prediction, which is kind of like the protein folding problem, but kind of predicting the secondary structure of a protein. And of course, protein secondary structure is critical to good function of the protein. You have things that are misfolded and they can cause disease, or they can become non-functional, and that can be problematic. So there are two basic problem spaces here. There's structure space and there's sequence space. And of course, they're different problems because sequence space is sort of this sequence-based thing where it's like almost like a language model. We've talked about in DevoWorm, we've talked a little bit about how people are using large language models to predict gene sequences. So analyzing genomic data using LLMs, people have developed a couple of techniques for that. This is where they talk about the data distributions of sequence space versus structure space. Structure space is more sort of about geometry. So data distributions of protein structure are smoother, making them more tractable to sample from. And so this came through several talks on inverse folding. So this is how they approach the problem of structure, was through folding. Large language models are notably absent from the bio workshops compared to diffusion and flow models. So people are in protein sequence prediction, they're using diffusion and flow models instead of large language models. So that's interesting because, we talked about large language models as being sort of, you can use it on natural language, and then you can also use it on genomes, but genomes aren't really natural language. So they're somewhat effective, but not entirely. So it's interesting that, they're using this different approach. As counter-argument, structured data is much rarer and more expensive to generate. So structured data is easier to sort of optimize, but it's harder to sort of generate and understand because it's this geometry, this geometric information that is not easy. Because, a structure or sequence, you can just sequence the protein, you have the amino acids, kind of what those combinations should look like. This is a little harder to get your hands on, because you have to do like a crystallography to actually get the structure, and that's expensive, and you have to kind of then digitize that. So number two, there's still a disconnect between academia and industry. Many talks focused on binding affinity, which is a thing in proteins where you have binding, sites and things like that. Though helpful, industry and practitioners seem more interested in multi-parameter optimization, including thermostability, immunogenicity, developability, etc. So there's this disconnect between what people in academia are interested in and in industry. Industry being like where they're trying to make something useful. Academia is where you have these like problems of, trying to sort of figure out hypothetical structures or, things that are interesting from an evolutionary standpoint, things like that. But, it's both are important, but they're disconnected. Number 3, data leakage, overfitting, train test splits, and experimental validation are key concerns. So these are all things that we see in normal machine learning that are now kind of a thing in this field as well. Model performance fell flat unless authors followed up with a meticulous walkthrough of training and test data, benchmarks, and in vitro validation. So this is really not an easy area. You have to really kind of get the training set right. You have to have good benchmarks, which are hard in an area where, you don't have, it's not like the basic problem of pattern recognition. There are a lot of moving parts here. And then in vitro validation, of course, where you have to do biological experiments. So accuracy is great. Number 4, scale and throughput matter a lot too. So if you're doing drug discovery, for example, you need to have things at scale. You can't just do small potatoes drug discovery. You have to do a lot of experiments. You have to do a lot of modeling and get those to work together. As mentioned in our MOML post, inference speed is a deciding factor whether a model is useful in industry. So this is their MOML post, or this is their Twitter thing here, where they have, this is just kind of a Twitter thread where they talk about inference speed of protein structure models. They just kind of go through this discussion here. So I'm not going to get into that, but that's basically what they're talking about. And they talk about protein design using inverse folding. So this is the inverse folding methodology. This is a method to predict a protein's one-dimensional amino acid sequence from its 3D structure. So you're predicting a amino acid sequence from the structure. Given importance of local 3D structure to antibody-antigen binding, many authors use inverse folding as a means to constrain a generative antibody process. They'd lock in a tight binding 3D structure and only sample sequences that could satisfy the 3D constraint. So this is something you can use to sort of optimize design. You can combine sequence and structural data. And so there are a number of uses for that in biotech, as shown in this figure, which I won't get into too much. But there's this technique that they use to combine structural information. You can see here, you can see a antibody-antigen complex here, and you also have sequence data, and you're combining those things. So this is, and then of course protein design using diffusion models. Diffusion models belong to the category of things I can't believe work as well as they do. So, diffusion models have been very popular in the recent past. Basically, diffusion models apply random Gaussian noise to a data distribution, an image. So you could take an image and you could add Gaussian noise to it. And you do this in a way that obscures the image entirely, and you get pure static. So if you've ever seen like a analog television and you see a static field on its channel, it's not broadcasting. That's what they're trying to get to, where you just kind of add Gaussian noise to an image until you obscure entirely, and you have this field of pure static, which means that there's no image that you can recover at all. The model then reverses this process, generating a final data point representative of the original distribution. And so basically you're taking an image, you're obscuring it with Gaussian noise. You're doing this across the distribution of images. You're then recovering that image where you reverse the process of adding noise, you can subtract noise, and then you end up getting something that represents the original distribution, or you try to approximate that original distribution. Protein designers are creative, applying diffusion models for a variety of tasks, including motif scaffolding, protein-protein docking, and more. So this is where they're using these diffusion models. This is a very popular method right now. And so people use this in a lot of image processing, where you can add in this noise and you can then take away the noise and try to recover the data. It has a lot of connections to physics as well. I just ran across the post where people were talking about the connection between diffusion models and statistical physics or statistical mechanics. So you have these connections to statistical mechanics and, Boltzmann entropy and things like that. So that's an interesting set of connections there as well. But they kind of go through some of their work here. This is important in molecular design and other things. Michael Bronstein, who does a lot of work on graph neural networks, did a number of papers on molecular design, specifically in geometry for molecular design, and this method, molecular surface interaction fingerprinting, which is a technique that is shown in this figure, which is where you have this protein structure, you have the surface, you can identify features on the surface, different binding pockets and things like that. You have this interaction fingerprint, which are the structure of these different things on the surface of the protein. You then you segment the protein structure through by segmenting out these patches. Then you have these different geometric features and these chemical features that you can add together, and it kind of tells you about the sequence in a way that we couldn't get from, say, like folding, or it says something about the structure, but it allows us to do that in a way that we can't know from, say, like folding studies or even sequence studies. That's an interesting thing. There's also a version of this using diffusion, which is where they use this massive approach, but using a diffusion version of it where you have the surface encoding. So you encode the surface structure. You use a diffusion model to model the structure. You have an encoder that encodes things to a latent space from the surface encoding. You decode and you use this diffusion technique to find patterns in the structure from the surface encoding. And then you can have site prediction from the latent space, which produces candidate structures. So that's interesting work. And so you have all these different data sets you can use, like the protein data bank and the database of interacting proteins. So protein data bank will have like the structures and the sequences. The database of interacting proteins will have the protein-protein interaction data. And a lot of times people will do stuff with protein-protein interactions in networks. So they'll use networks to model these interactions, but that doesn't tell you a lot about the interactions. They just tell you sort of the scope of the interactions and some of the patterns. In this case, what we're doing is we're reconstructing the sequence, the structure, and we're looking at the interactions very specifically in terms of those things. So you can combine this with network theory, you can combine this with other things, and really kind of learn a lot about proteins. And then, of course, we have energy-based models, which is, as I said, the diffusion techniques have connections to Boltzmann entropy and Boltzmann statistical mechanics, but there's more explicit work on this in terms of energy-based models. So energy-based models bridge energy and probability with how they represent data distributions. For example, proteins of favorable conformations exist in low energy states, which are local minima in that space, increasing the probability that an optimization process lands there. The bridge between energy and probability is called the Boltzmann distribution. So the Boltzmann distribution, of course, is known in statistical mechanics as a way to characterize the distribution of a set of particles. And as they undergo entropy and they get their energy minimized, you can capture that landscape and you can find the minima. And it tells you something about that system. So they talk a little bit about energy-based models in proteomics, which is what they're doing here. So there was a lot of interesting work on this. And then that's it for this post. So there was a part 2 and a part 3, which I won't go through, but those are also available from this blog. So that's my recap of that. I wanted to go over that because I think it's really interesting in terms of both the bioinformatics and some advances in machine learning and what's going on in that space.
and they've got large databases, like you said, of structures and composition, um, different modalities collected in terms of looking at those different ways to kind of measure things about those structures. Not necessarily give you the structure in terms of like crystallography, but things that give you something about the bonds that are really interesting. Anyway, like I think that speaks to these databases give you a better sense of why these diffusion models are helpful, right? In terms of how diffusion models have been helpful in image generation and and some interesting things that have been applications in medical imaging in terms of MRI using diffusion models too. Anyway, yeah, it's great. I've really got a lot from being on, I think it's M2D2's Slack, which is kind of like Mila's protein design bioinformatics group, and I see a lot of speakers coming from Vant AI. So I saw Bronstein's the chief science officer for Vant AI, they're it's been interesting to follow developments there.
Yeah, Michael Bronstein is a beast, I guess.
Yeah, for sure, right? And but I see this, or like I think I sent you Ben Blazek's contact info, who's he's like at Argonne or something there, close to you. But is heads this kind of materials science. What do they call it? Materials science data platforms. Anyway, it's all about like using the national labs' big collections of measurements that they've made on materials, and all these databases, trying to put that together with using large language models and various current ML techniques. They've got a hackathon that's coming up this next month, I think, in May. Anyway, it's really great, great use of ML AI tools with large data, trying to synthesize and capture some things that basically kind of like sort through all this stuff and find interesting combinations. That and he seems super well grounded. Like he's not just trying to. We were talking about some of the Google DeepMind stuff that have been kind of not retracted, but a lot of material science people think it should be.
Oh,
just in terms of yeah.
They were doing stuff with in that domain, and they didn't think it was like up to snuff.
Yeah, like we set AI out, and it discovered 2 million new materials, and then it's like it takes the research community a couple of years to go through it and be like, we see nothing here, and I think you can tell. I mean, in some discussions I had with other people in the medical domain. And I think you see the same thing happening, where it's just like, you get these DeepMind announcements, and but it's not like anybody, it's not like DeepMind has tried to get medical approval for any of these things, and it might have a lot to do with the fact that when you actually get into the details, and try and make tools that actually change patient care, like, oh wait, this isn't actually helpful. You know,
Yeah.
and you know, I haven't met with her in a while, but Noisebridge had a regular from Livermore that follows the DeepMind work on nuclear fusion, and you know, again, it's this, you know, they get a lot of announcements, and it's
Yeah.
not really clear that it's actually changing, you know, changing physics, or you know, whether those tools are actually getting into pipelines in terms of, you know, I mean, certainly the big thing here is the National Ignition Facility, and you know, the time that you can maintain a positive fusion reaction has a lot to do, you know, like has a lot to do about real time control of the lasers, right? And
Right.
you know, I think everybody thinks that reinforcement learning is a really interesting approach to it, but it's not clear that it's beating out everything
Yeah.
at this point. You know,
Yeah. That's an interesting topic where, you know, we have this issue of like people find something that's really interesting using AI, and it's like you're doing this data mining, so you're taking a data set, you find this stuff, and then like it's like, well, is this really useful to what the problem? Because there's always been this thing in, say, like bioinformatics where you know, people have argued that it's not really problem based. Like a lot of biological research, for example, will be focused on problems that people identify, and then like in bioinformatics, you flip that on its head and you say, I'm going to take a method and I'm going to just find things, and I'm not going to pose a problem. I'm just going to like do a survey, and then we'll sort it out later. And so, you know, apparently, if you sort it out later, it may not be very useful. But that's, I mean, you know, I don't know. I'm kind of a sort of a skeptic in some ways of the problem based approach, simply because you don't know what problems you have until you do the survey. So that may be useful in that way, in posing problems and posing questions. But yeah, it's definitely. I think the announcements are where you make a big announcement. That doesn't mean you have something. It just means you can make a big splash. And there's a lot of that sort of posturing in big science, where they try to say, we're doing this, we have a lot of money. Yeah.
I think it actually comes. Oh,
Sorry, I know we're already over the 2 hour mark, so you know, people have to go. Then so be it. I think, but yeah, thanks so much for sharing all this stuff too. And like, speaking of hackathons, I do just want to briefly mention I was at Neurodata Without Borders last week. That was pretty fun. I already spoke about it with Bradley and Morgan. And that was down in Houston, Neurodata Without Borders 2024. And we're having some discussions about what we'd like to do with those hackathons moving forward. For this hackathon last week, it was just 3 days, working from like 9 to 5, and that, you know, that's like you know, including like meetings, like other activities. It was pretty fun, but more so about networking and getting people together. So yeah, we just want to see what we want to do moving forward. But I know for sure, in-person physical hackathons, like I really miss those. It's nice to finally be. It's really nice to finally be at those again. So yeah.
Yeah, those are always good events. So, I mean, how do you find hackathons? I mean, how do you find them useful? How do you follow up on hackathons?
Yeah, I mean, when you said how do you find hackathons, I meant mostly through like mailing lists
Okay, yeah.
and things. But like, how do you find it useful? You know, it is at the very least putting on your resume or CV that you attended a hackathon is a really good sign. Being able to post about it on social media, on LinkedIn or Twitter, being able to network out through those ways too. And having some sort of recognition or validation of what you've done, even if you're not, say, like number one, like at the very least putting forward projects and putting on your portfolio that you work there, that's really, really strong and a really, really great thing to do too. So yeah, but nothing beats in-person collaboration. So yeah.
Yeah. And then when you follow up on things, how do you ensure that you get to do the next step? I mean, is there like a technique that you've seen that people use, or is there an accountability for saying we're going to do all this stuff and then it never gets done, or gets done?
It's tough. It's tough because, you know, it is all voluntary. It really is. I'm doing a hackathon with a group of other. Officially, there were 4 other guys on this. it's really two of us. And then whenever we meet, it's literally just like me and him. Like, because there's no like requirements, like stuff like accountability, getting people on board, making sure we actually accomplish stuff that's really difficult. So you just have to practice like good interpersonal practical skills to see what works and see how things work out. I would say that. But ultimately, I feel like pitching to investors and investment funds, like say Kavli Foundation, seeking to get some sort of monetary reward, that's what's going to get people on board. And you know, you can say like, oh, we want a hackathon with a prize of like $2,000. Then if you pitch that to like a foundation of some sorts, then they'll be much more willing to fund it. You know, because then people will be on board to want to get together and do that sort of stuff. Because if you just say like I know for this one down in Houston, I was willing to travel down there because there was funding for me to travel with a hotel and to fly there through the NIH. Otherwise, I probably couldn't have even afforded to do it. Just respectfully, money is money. Okay. Yeah. So that's one of more practical logistics things, and we're discussing like, you know, and depending on like time, duration, like how long you're gonna get involved with those things. This one was 3 days, so I was just going down there to Texas for 3 days and then coming back. And that's time out of my weekly schedule because it was during the week. So you just have to be wise and like judicious with how you are budgeting time and how you think people themselves can adapt. So, you know, what have you. Yeah.
Well, I think that, yeah, that's as good as any other strategy I've heard. So I just wanted to get your take on it because that is a thing. You know, if we do a hackathon, we want to do things, we want to have things result from that. We just do things in the hackathon and forget about them. It's not very useful. So, yeah. And then we've talked about, you know, different hackathons. And that's one of the things about, like, you know, besides planning a hackathon, like, what are the results of that? So we've had like working sessions in the lab. We've
At the very
kind
least, even
yeah,
when people are doing voluntary work together, like in a group or like a huddle, like let's say there's just like 3 or 4 of us, right?
yeah,
You know, when you're working in a small group like that, accountability is much easier and much more effective. Like I told you in my other hackathon that I'm working with, there's 5 of us, but 2 of our members just haven't gotten back to us in like 4 or 5 weeks. So I've already kicked them out. You know, that is just unacceptable. Yep. Yeah.
yeah.
And I reached out to them several times. And, you know, so you see what I'm saying? Like anybody can get on board and it's really easy. You know, it's kind of like signing up for a mailing list, signing up for a group, for a project. When it's all free and everything's open and available to you, you'll get like 10 times as many more people signing up versus how many people actually show up. And then when people show up, how can you keep people on board to corral them to get people and things together? So ideally, like being transparent, open, accountable, and straightforward with all these things is the best thing. But you know, I don't mean to like be super like I don't know, like business like towards these approaches because it's all about the science, all about the research.
Yeah.
But if everything's free, people don't value it. If I want to have like an open workshop on teaching people how to use Twitch to stream science, and I say it's free and open to the public, and it'll all be recorded, no one's going to take it seriously, and no one will value it. So you just got to be wise about how you brand yourself, your time, and your energy, and the projects that you're committing to, and what you yourself are doing. So I know, like with my other project, we're making a VR capoeira app. Like capoeira being like the fitness dance from Brazil and African Brazilian countries. So I'm really absolutely branding that as something people can put on their resume and CV in a very like you know, social fitness, music, martial arts sort of manner. You know, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that's those are wonderful sort of insights on that. So yeah, thank you. Morgan was going to say something.
Well, sorry. As soon as I say that, they're grinding coffee. But NeuroTechX Global Hackathon, yeah, I'm just trying to think about how to structure it so that there's fewer projects, you know, that kind of get half done and then forgotten. And like one of the things that we're talking about is, you know, is trying to kind of see if we can do one larger project together, you know, and something that John Griffiths is been advocating for, which I think would actually be really awesome if we can make it work. Sorry, I don't know if I'm if I'm coming through on this Wi-Fi here.
Oh yeah, you're fine.
Anyway, okay, cool. So, but yeah, just like very much behind everything that Hussein's already said, and yeah, very interested to hear more details about the Nerd Data Without Borders, and in particular the Spyglass projects, or which I think is another kind of cool initiative built on top of.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Like we were discussing Spyglass pretty closely there too. And once again, we're now like 20, like 10 or 12 minutes overboard. I'm sorry, Bradley. Did you end the meeting? I'm sorry. Thanks, guys. I know, because like usually these meetings last 2 hours. So okay, thanks.
It's usually 2.5.
Yeah.
Saturday, we all have things to do, don't we?
Yeah.
Sorry, but even then, and I appreciated the discussions on Neurodata Without Borders and the ideology, especially behind projects like Spyglass and things too, like the framework for the reproducible, shareable pipelines. Just like realistically, we're all still considering or maybe not we're all, but I personally, on some level, have been legitimately considering how closely we can still tie to that ideology. That information wants to be free, like neurodata without borders. It's in the name. We don't want borders on things. And how effectively and practically we can still maintain hackathons, projects, people getting on board with things, if we're just prioritizing so much of that, open source ideology that's is central to a lot of the mission behind a lot of projects, but still encouraging people to get on board, to contribute and see what we can do. So there's my 2 cents. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. All right. Well, why don't we? Does anyone else have anything they want to share? Or... I don't know if Jesse had anything else. I didn't even really get to give an update, but
once again, my gist is that in-person events above just virtual stuff all the time. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. If I had to travel to Indonesia for a hackathon, I would do it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's Malaysia in October.
Oh yeah.
Systems, machine, and cybernetics. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I forget if it's October or November, but it's late fall.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So I think that's it for today. We didn't get to go over the Slack today, but I think that that those are like people. If you're in a channel, you can go over things. Last time we did the brain organoids. We've done computational psychiatry recently. So those are 2 that are very active. But yeah, if we have any other things, please bring them up. Kind of, you can also bring things from one channel to another. So if you find something that's relevant to another channel, you can put it in there. And so I think that's it for today. So thanks for attending. Talk to you later. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah.